We kick things off on today's programme with the breaking news that Erik ten Hag will remain as Manchester United manager for next season. Stewart Robson joins us, as does Mark Ogden, to discuss this news, which literally broke within the last half an hour. Oggy, where's all this come from?
Well, United have had the review. It's taken over 2 weeks, but they've decided that Ten Hag is the best option. So it's been Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Dave Brailsford, Omar Barada, the incoming CEO. Dan Ashworth isn't there yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dan Ashworth had some input as the incoming director of football. So they've looked at the situation, they've realised that the options out there aren't what they want. Thomas Tuchel, Mauricio Pochettino, they didn't quite tick the box. Long-standing admiration for Gareth Southgate, but the timing doesn't work. And I think they realised, I think they were caught out by the fan backlash almost after the FA Cup final. United won the FA Cup, as we know, and the fans were so angry at the stories out on the Friday that Ten Hag was going to be sacked. The Guardian wrote a story that Ten Hag would be sacked regardless. And the fans had a backlash. And I think when he won the FA Cup, and it looked like he was waving to the fans at the time, that Ten Hag was doing a lot of waves and a lot of kind of kisses to the crowd. I think the owners have thought, well, let's be honest, this guy's really popular. The fans don't want anybody else to come in. It will cost around £9 million to sack him. So I think they've decided that the least worst option is to keep Ten Hag. But they are talking about a new contract. His contract expires at the end of next season. So from being on the brink of the sack, he's now getting a new contract. So it's interesting. And I know we're going to talk about the grades of last season. I think he's come back from a very, very difficult position to save his job. But ultimately, it's because there's no obvious candidate to replace him, because he didn't really earn the right to keep his job apart from winning the FA Cup. Fans are utterly stupid sometimes, aren't they? I mean, they're so fickle. And, you know, they win a cup final, great, but did they have the blinkers on for the rest of the season? You know, just, and anything else. You know, they've had, as Augie said, they've had a review. The review was the season. The review was the performances. The review was the batterings that they took from less than mediocre sides in the Premier League. Yeah, you can win games. Wigan won the FA Cup. They beat Manchester City like Man United did. They were relegated. You don't judge on the odd game against Liverpool and Manchester City and say, well, you know, we've derailed other people's seasons. That's not what a football club should be about. A football club should be about not looking at other teams and how you've disrupted them, but what you have done yourself. And yes, they won the cup, but the rest of it was absolutely dire. And quite frankly, the longer the Ineos are in there, and it hasn't been long, the more you doubt their ability actually to bring to Man United what many thought they were, which was utter clarity in the way they were going to go. You know, they're going to have egg in their face if Manchester United play in the first 3 or 4 months of next season like they played in the first 3 or 4 months of this season. Big decisions had to be made, and they have not made it.
I think that's the thing, and you talk about how fickle football fans are, which we know. And while, yes, you finish the season on a relative high, given the FA Cup final, as you say, Manchester United don't start well next season. And all of a sudden, maybe you go from Erik talking about Erik ten Hag and extending his contract, or whether he renews by that point, to all of a sudden, 6-8 games in, what's the cheapest way to move on from Erik ten Hag and who's available? I just feel that if you base your decisions around the reaction of the fans after a game, even as big and as important a game as the FA Cup final, I'm not sure that that's the foundation you start with from Ineos's perspective in terms of making footballing decisions.
To that point, Mark, what is it that the fans have seen that maybe we haven't, where they feel that Erik ten Hag deserves another season? Or is this just everybody hunkering down, going, everyone's against us, everyone's against Ten Hag, we will show them?
There's definitely a bit of that, but I agree with the guys in the sense that, you know, fans think with their heart and their emotion, don't they? And I think if you're a football club, you have to be cold about it and make the decision that is best for the club rather than what the fans want. And I think, you know, in many ways, the fans at some point were really down on the players. A lot of the United players, they feel that have let down successive managers, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, even Jose Mourinho, and they think that certain players, I mean, one of them being Anthony Martial, he was there from Louis van Gaal's time right through to the end of last season. And they feel that he epitomised the fact that so many players survived at Old Trafford when they weren't performing, and they survived manager after manager. Jose Mourinho tried to get Martial out of the club, but he couldn't do it. That these players just didn't deliver enough on the pitch to justify surviving or outlasting so many managers. So even when we had that horrendous defeat at Crystal Palace, the fans were happy to blame the players because they felt the players had let Ten Hag down. Now, that gave Ten Hag an incredible kind of security blanket, which he probably didn't earn, because it certainly it detracted from the reality of what was happening on the pitch. You know, a minus goal difference last season. They finished on -1 goal difference. They finished 8th. They finished so far off the top of the table. I think it was 30-odd points from behind Man City. But all this was kind of overlooked because they felt that Ten Hag had got tough with certain players, Jadon Sancho being one, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo last season, Marcus Rashford this season. A lot of fans think that Ten Hag has been the medicine that Man United need. And it may well be that, but, you know, the alternative view is that he's been a bit too tough with the players and they're not performing because they don't like his man management. But the fans have made their decision that they think this guy is what Man United need, what this dressing room needs. And I think Ineos have finally realised that after the cup final that is it really worth antagonising the fan base by bringing in a coach who would not be universally popular. The point being made is that we've known for a while now that Gareth Southgate was their first choice. He's got a good relationship with Dave Brailsford, Dan Ashworth, who's coming in. And I think in an ideal world for United that they would have appointed Southgate, but it's not an ideal world because we've got the Euros starting on Friday, and if England do well, they might be playing the Euros as the final on I think the 15th of July. Man United's first pre-season game is the day after. So it doesn't work in that time frame. But what somebody told me back in March at United was that they are working towards next season with Ten Hag, but if it doesn't go well, the ideal scenario would be keep him in place at the start of next season, and then if it doesn't start well, Gareth Southgate's available in November. And it's a very short-sighted look at things because you don't want to waste another year. But, you know, I think that they've come into the club, there's so many problems to address, and the big one that they have to address, the manager, they've decided, not quite sure I want to make this call because the fans might get upset with us and there's no obvious candidates to replace him. So they've fudged it, really.
Here's the thing, Robbo, yeah? The first 2-3 months of next season, what have we seen, with the exception of the game against Liverpool and against a hungover Manchester City in the FA Cup, that suggests that Manchester United are trending in anywhere but the right direction under Ten Hag, that all of a sudden everything is going to come together for the start of next season?
You've seen nothing that will suggest it's all going to come together, because when you've seen Manchester United play at their very worst, they've been disjointed, there's been no leadership from the side of the field. Of course the players haven't been good enough. Of course there's been a lot of anger amongst the players and about the man management. But the manager, in terms of tactics, until the cup final, hadn't got it right. And there was games where things were going wrong, and he just stood on the side and looked almost dazed at times. That's when you want the manager to come out and change one or two things, and he didn't really do so. The club has been, or the team under him has been on a downward spiral for a long time this season, and it didn't look as though it was going to get any better. They had that. I mean, if they'd have lost to Coventry in the semi-final of the cup, it would have been an absolute disaster. Everybody would have written him off then. But they got back into that game, they win the cup final, and suddenly he stays in the job. It's madness.
Well, it doesn't make sense, as Stewart said, because they were, a big toe away from getting knocked out by a championship side, that offside. So does that make him the man to go into next season? You know, he did have his problems this year. There's no getting away from it. But they were outplayed. And by the way, don't let yourself believe that he went into some of these games early on in the season threadbare. It was only when the season went on that the injuries really started to kick in, and they were getting outplayed by a lot of teams at the start of the season. I think it was their worst ever Premier League finish. As Oggy said, they were in a minus goal difference. They got knocked out of the Carabao Cup at home by Newcastle reserves. They finished bottom of the Champions League group, and they were absolutely woeful to watch. Cup final apart, this is just... It's just bonkers. It just smacks to me of Ineos not really knowing what they want to do or where they want to go, and been frightened to me. If you're pandering to fans at this stage, that's a problem. You cannot pander to the supporters in big business. You cannot. You have to make hard and fast decisions. And look, they may be better next year when they get some players. And by the way, they won't be going to him and saying, "What do you think about this player in Holland?" Because of you've only got to look at what he's brought in. So he may have to work with what he has to work with. And I've no doubt they will be better than they were this year. They certainly should be. But I do not think he is the man. And I think it was shown this year in a lot of games against teams, I'm going to say in the bottom 6 in the Premier League, home and away, that he was, as Robbo said, devoid of ideas when they were swimming against the tide.
Oggy?
Absolutely. You know, and I think the one thing for certain is even if he signs a new contract, no matter how long it is, he is under massive, massive pressure from the start of next season, because he will know now that they've looked around, they've looked at options, and that they didn't quite fancy what was out there right now. But there will be better options coming out. And I think once Dan Ashworth gets into Old Trafford, everybody's in place then, and everybody will be able to be accountable. And I think that was one thing that they were also quite wary of. If they make a big decision on the new manager or changing the manager without having a director of football in place, then that would kind of leave them open to accusations of you didn't know what you're doing, or you've done this without a director of football. But when Ashworth comes in, he'll be accountable, as will everybody around him. But Ten Hag will know that he's got to get it right from the off next season, because, you know, once Gareth Southgate becomes available, whether he has a good Euros or not, he's got friends in high places at Man United, and the fans won't like it, but he's still highly admired by people at Man United. So in many ways, unless Ten Hag starts the season well, he's got the shadow of Gareth Southgate hanging over him, and maybe other managers that may become available as well. So he's got to show that this season was a one-off. But it happened so many times, so many performances, so many games where they were just torn apart by inferior teams. You know, what's going to happen with the players that struggled in this season? You know, Luke Shaw, Marcus Rashford. Luke Shaw's come out this week and said that he played when he wasn't fit. Now, that might not have been a direct criticism of Erik ten Hag, but it certainly wasn't complimentary with the manager, saying that he might miss the Euros because he came back injured playing for Man United. Marcus Rashford had a terrible season with Ten Hag this season. You know, a couple of disciplinary issues there where we saw that he went to Belfast after a game and was disciplined by Ten Hag. Their relationship isn't close. So what's going to happen with United's so-called best player? It's created as many problems as it solved, this one, but it has at least brought United some clarity. So they're going into the transfer window now. They know what they need. They know the manager's in place. But we know that managers sign contracts and they can be gone within 6 months. And I wouldn't suggest that this is any sign of a long-term fix at Man United. It's probably a sticking plaster to get them to where they need to be, whenever that is in a year's time.
But it just seems to continue, this sticking plaster Band-Aid mentality from Manchester United, Mark. Like, they're up there. This is one of the biggest clubs in the world. Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern. Yeah. If they put in the season that they saw last year, there's absolutely no way they would keep their coach. Is this just where Manchester United are these days?
Absolutely, and I'm amazed it's got to this because, you know, Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos came in and they made some big changes straight away. You know, John Murtaugh's gone, the football director's gone, the chief exec's gone, they've brought in a new chief executive director of football. They've made massive changes, big changes in key positions, but there's no bigger position at a football club than the manager. And they bottled it, really. Because what people that cover Man United, myself and other people, it's been pretty clear for a while that they wanted to replace Ten Hag. They weren't sold on Ten Hag, but they've got to the big decision and they bottled it because they didn't want to upset the fans. They didn't want to make a decision that would be wrong because they didn't have all the experts in place, i.e. Dan Ashworth. They didn't want to be seen as the wrong people making the wrong decisions. And what's happened is they've gone in with this big kind of selling point of being, you know, we're going to make things different, we're going to do things differently. And they've been like the Glazers. They've sat around waiting and waiting for weeks and weeks to decide what to do. This is classic Glazer behaviour. This is what happens every year at Man United. Every summer, they get to the summer, we're going to sign this player, we're going to sign that player. We get to August, we've not signed that player, we're going to sign this player we've never heard of before because one of our scouts has seen him, and we're going to pay a lot of money for him that we didn't need to pay. You know, Rasmus Højlund's £70 million when he could have got 40. So all of a sudden, they come in with these big ideas of changing the way the football clubs run, and they turn into the Glazers straight away.
Ways, I think you can also look at this. From a Manchester United perspective, maybe you look at the struggles others have had in filling their managerial vacancies, and you wonder, you kind of worry about getting caught up in that quagmire. Your preferred option, as Oggy is saying, isn't available till at least pre-season, probably November, more realistic. I disagree with Oggy in that I have no issue if your preferred option is available in November. It's not writing a season off, it's writing the first 3 months off. If that's who you're determined to get.
You're waiting for Gareth Southgate. You're not waiting for
those decisions are mine. I'm with you, and I'm not sure Gareth Southgate is the right fix. But if this is who Manchester United and Ineos or whoever's making those decisions decide this is our man, then it's worth waiting the extra 3 months or whatever it is. The part that I just simply cannot get past is offering Erik ten Hag a new contract. Why? Okay, his current contract is up in a year's time, but let's be honest, he's not going anywhere. Right. Nobody's coming after Erik ten Hag. So why do you feel this need to sign Ten Hag to a new contract at the very least before, let's again pencil in November as Gareth Southgate's available date. Why do you feel a need to offer to have that kind of squared away? If you get to November and he's doing well and Gareth Southgate is no longer an option, well then fine. Have those talks then. I just don't see the point in having those conversations now. And that's being as positive and as optimistic as I possibly can about Erik ten Hag and Manchester United.
Didn't they give Solskjaer a new contract, remember?
Yeah.
I don't think this club, I think they are the Premier League champions in recent years at giving out new deals and long deals, well, maybe Chelsea apart recently, to people that we all sit here and go, what? How is that player or this manager been given a new deal? As Shaq said, it just seems the rush to go in and sign people that nobody else really want, not on the salaries that they're on, are pushing for. I mean, it does, as Oggy said, it kind of stinks of us being run at the moment the way the Glazers have run it. And I've seen all these reports. Oh, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he's running this, really tight ship now, and he's putting his fist down. Everybody has to come to work, and people don't care about that. The supporters don't care if the people working in the office have to go in or not. They don't give a toss about that. What they want to know is, what are you going to do for me on the field, right? And at the moment, they are dithering and dathering around, and this is, I mean, as you say, this broke late,
yeah.
And if they wanted Gareth Southgate, by the way, they could have done a deal behind the scenes already. With the FA, with Southgate, people could make these deals happen, and they've not done that either.
To that point, Mark, why is a club as big as Manchester United overlooking the likes of Thomas Tuchel's available, Pochettino available as well, and focusing on Gareth Southgate? What is the obsession with him?
Well, it's a cultural thing, in the sense that they want to rebuild the culture of the club, and they think that Gareth Southgate has got a track record of doing that with England, because in Gareth Southgate's credit, when he took the England job in 2016, it was an absolute mess. Nobody wanted to watch England, the squad morale was terrible, and I think they just got the idea that, well, he fixed England to the point where they've nearly won something, and he can fix Man United. Now, it's getting to the point where big clubs are scared off big managers, in the sense that Tuchel, Pochettino, they don't like managers that will basically have an opinion. They want managers who will basically toe the party line, because sporting directors and directors of football are now becoming the most powerful people in football. So Thomas Tuchel, as we know, will resist people telling him that you need to sign this player, or you can't sign that player, or you must get rid of this player. And Pochettino's, at Chelsea, the reason he left Chelsea is because he just couldn't align to the views of the owners, that they wanted to go a certain way, and Pochettino decided that way wasn't going to make the team any better. Why Liverpool gone for Arne Slot? Arne Slot is a coach that will be desperately and so grateful to take the Liverpool job, but he's not in the same league as Klopp in terms of personality or presence. So the problem nowadays is that clubs want that word holistic. They want a holistic approach to it, where the manager and the sporting director of football, the CEO are all aligned. All these words that come into football that weren't there 5 or 10 years ago. Alignment. And Southgate is an alignment coach. He's very close to Ashworth. He worked with Dan Ashworth at the FA, rebuilding another word, DNA. He brought the DNA into the England team. And that's what they want. They want people that sit around a table and all agree about the same thing. Tuchel, Pochettino, Mourinho, Conte, these coaches don't do that. And that's why all of them are out of work. Well, obviously, they've been out of work recently, but that's why big clubs are not really pushing to sign these new coaches. They want young, impressionable coaches who are grateful for the opportunity.
Robbo, you love all these new buzzwords.
Oh, I love them all. He's absolutely right. Gareth Southgate, they're looking at him. He's not because he's a wonderful coach. We've seen in big games he hasn't quite got it right. He's very good at getting on with the hierarchy. He's very good at bringing people together. He's very good at saying the right things in the press. That's what his skill is. And if you want somebody like that in the job, he's not going to take you to the next level in terms of coaching ability. He's going to have to get somebody who's going to be a great coach to come alongside him. And I can't see that happening at Manchester United, because once again, he will want to have that relationship with the hierarchy, and he won't want somebody that might challenge him on occasions. It seems a strange move that that's the person they really want in the job. And it says everything about Ineos, I think.
You mentioned the report cards Oggy did at the start. That was going to be our focus today. Obviously, it has switched slightly, but should we show the report cards?
Well,
there it is. Oh, great. Cheers, everyone up. Looking ahead to the start of the new season. Robbo, crazily enough, the most generous, giving them a C. Thank you very much, everybody. We will say goodbye to Mark now, as I'm sure more on this story as it breaks on ESPN FC.